But there doesn't seem to be any energy that's linking us, any measurable energy. And so Rex Stanford is trying to analyze parapsychological interactions in terms of one system responding to the intentions of the other and giving up any idea of some energy that makes it happen. This goes exactly along with what I'm presenting to you, because this, what Rex Stanford is pointing to, would be the way in which a higher grade occasion can influence the aims of a lower grade occasion. That is not an energetic transmission. Energetic transmission is efficient causation. But this is something that takes place in the realm of final causation or purpose. So this again fits with Stanford's theory. And then the third theory that's been significant, this was by someone named William Browdy. He has what he calls a theory of lability and inertia. So lability, like being labile in psychology, a labile system is one that is extremely, highly responsive to its environment, very changeable and fluid, whereas an inert system is just that, an inert system, right? And so his theory is that the more labile a system is, the more responsive it is to parapsychological effects. So for example, it's really hard to levitate a table, but it's not that hard to influence a random number generator. Things like that, right? Now, this again fits right in with the theory that I'm developing here, because the higher the grade of an occasion, the more labile it is. And the more a system is influenced by the presence of a high-grade occasion, the more labile it is. And this theory would lead us to believe that the more labile a system it is, the higher the grade it is. And the higher the grade it is, the more responsive it is to empathic and telepathic interactions, and the more responsive it is to the aims of the other occasions in its environment. So it's nice and confirming to see that the three big theoretical formulations that have been proposed in parapsychology over the last few decades all find a comfortable home within this metaphysical and cosmological vision. All that by way of a digression. And now I want to speak about what I would suggest we have to do in order to expand our current science, in order to accommodate these other phenomena. So the first thing we have to do is we have to give up our narrow Pythagorean mysticism. And we have to recognize that mathematics is not the ultimate language of nature. You know, it's like Newton could believe that God was a geometer. And so Newton could believe, and many people in Newton's time could believe, that in discerning the law of gravitation, Newton had read God's mind. Right? But there's this Pythagorean fixation there, the idea that mathematics is the ultimate language which conditions all interactions in nature. And this is simply not true. Right? Mathematics is very important and very interesting, and indeed the key to understanding the behavior of inorganic entities is mathematics. But mathematics is not useful to us all that much in understanding ourselves, in understanding psychology, in understanding sociology. We simply have to recognize that mathematics is not the be-all and the end-all of understanding nature, and that the ultimate understanding of nature will never be expressed in an equation. So we have to start with that. Secondly, we also have to recognize the limits of logic. Logic itself has limits. And Gödel, in the 20th century, demonstrated this in the most remarkable way. Gödel's proof is intricate and difficult to understand, and people interpret it in various ways, but I'm convinced that what it means is this. It means that the notion of truth is larger and richer than the notion of logic. What Gödel's proof shows is that in any logical domain, let's take arithmetic, which is the one that he used, he says that in any logical system, at least as complex as arithmetic, it is possible to form a statement which you know is true, but which you could never reach by deduction. Which means that there are an infinite number of arithmetical truths that we can never deduce, because truth is larger than logic. And so no logical system can ever encompass all of reality. We need to recognize that all of our logical systems are abstractions from actuality that are responsive to the particular interest that we have at this moment. And so our science has to get beyond its reductionism and recognize its heuristic function. But on the other hand, we cannot give up logic, because science is all about a logical understanding of actuality. Now, that doesn't mean that a logical understanding of actuality can ever be fully adequate, but it does mean that as mental beings, we form logical understandings as a way of navigating through actual experience. Right? And we also have to realize that logic is not fixed. It's a radically evolutionary subject. Whitehead said that the great advances in human civilization that are coming will most probably be prefigured by advances in logic. In fact, it turns out that the whole nature and substance of logic was completely transfigured in the last 300 years, and most of us haven't even caught up with that. But very simply, people are developing logics of complementarity, fuzzy logics, all kinds of logics other than the one that we're familiar with. And I'm convinced that it's in these new logics that we will find the tools for working with the realities that we're opening up here. Now, another thing we have to realize is that the kinds of explanations that we're used to in terms of logic and in terms of deductive systems, which science always is, have to give way, at least in part, to other kinds of explanation. So Stephen Browdy calls these psychological forms of explanation. So here's an example that's commonly used. Children who vividly remember past lives were usually killed early in their last life, and often violently. Now, this is an explanatory principle, but you can't measure it. You can't reduce it to logic because the terms are too rich. Killed violently, too early, right? These are like very rich psychological concepts which are explanatory, but are not scientific in the usual sense. We could say these are mythic explanations or psychological explanations. Another one is that poltergeist phenomena almost always take place around disturbed adolescence. Now, a disturbed adolescent, that's a psychological term. It's not easy to pin down. Exactly how do you define disturbed and how old is adolescent? You can't exactly say. But we know what we mean when we say it. And as we move from the physical world into the vital world, and beyond that into the mental world, the way in which those beings think and the kind of decisions that they make are more psychological. Right? So in psychology, for example, in the discipline of psychology and psychotherapy, behaviorism has become entirely irrelevant, almost entirely irrelevant. We speak in this other way. We speak about subpersonalities interacting with each other. We speak about influences like astrological influences or weather influence. We speak about personality types like the Enneagram and so forth. And we have these amazing conversations which are very richly satisfying and yet which cannot be reduced to the kinds of logic that we use in defining mathematics or other kinds of disciplines like that. It's a different mode of explanation. And it may turn out that these psychological modes of thinking and explaining are more useful to us in understanding reality than science wants to give them credit for. You following me here? However, very little philosophical thought has been given to the logic of psychology, to the logic of psychological explanation. I find this a lot in my own life because I'm a psychotherapist and I'm very fluent in these various forms of psychological explanation. And I hear myself having these conversations with my friends about what's going on with my other friends or with each other. And yet when I sit back and look at it, I don't know what the rules are of that kind of discourse. When I'm having a philosophical discourse, I understand the rules. I know that I'm starting with a certain set of coherent concepts and logically deducing from them consequences which I'm testing against reality. It's all very clear. But when I try to talk about people's psychological types or their psychodynamics or things like that, it all makes sense. But I myself don't understand the logic of what I'm saying. What constitutes a good psychological explanation? What constitutes a bad one? What are the rules? We don't really know. And we haven't turned our scientific and philosophical thought to this mode of explanation. So this is something that is awaiting the doing. We need to begin to get clearer and more precise about psychological modes of explanation to know how and when we can apply them well. And I think this is a very important part of what we need to do as we move forward in a science of the transphysical worlds. Now, another thing we need to do is we need to work on instrumentation. One of the reasons that physics has made such incredible progress, and all the sciences, is because of instruments like microscopes and telescopes and radio telescopes and so forth, which have allowed us to greatly increase our sensitivity. Now, I think that there is something analogous to that in the realm of parapsychological or transphysical investigations. And this is what are called the siddhis, right, or the extraordinary powers. Michael Murphy has made a wonderful study of these in his book, The Future of the Body, in which he's shown that if we group the basic animal capacities, we can see how the basic animal capacities become hominized and expanded in humanity and can then become further expanded in a transhuman, a superhuman development. So, for example, there's a siddhi called the Hanuman siddhi, which enables a human being to focus his or her attention so narrowly that the human being can see clearly a single atom. And in fact, back in the early 1900s, a group of clairvoyants did work and actually anticipated some of the results of quantum mechanics by using the Hanuman siddhi to see small things. It's also possible with another siddhi, the name of which I've forgotten, to see very large things like the whole universe or a whole galaxy. There are all kinds of siddhis which enable us to learn things about the world that we can't learn with our physical senses.